We're going to take a look at the Adventures in Poor Taste X-Men Monday, which is yesterday and today's Tuesday, and I'm late. But there are some things in here that I did want to talk about beyond just that nobody can get enough of the X-Men right now. So let's do it. Hey everybody, this is Perch. There's a link in the description below. Adventures in Poor Taste is one of the websites that features articles and other things. And to their credit, their article headlines are far less clickbaity than most, if that's a word. But generally, you kind of get a meat and potatoes like description of what you're going to get. Like, here's a comic and here's a review of it. It will not be boring. Benjamin Percy and Joshua Cassara talk X-Force. Cool. That all makes sense. So that's good. We want more of that kind of just straightforward, please. So there's been a lot of different pieces of news floating around Jonathan Hickman and the X-Men and kind of where it all goes. And another interesting little dangling tidbit in all this that isn't part of the article, but to keep in the back of your mind, is that once upon a time, Kevin Feige borrowed heavily from Jonathan Hickman for his Avengers plans, specifically the big ones, the cap off of Phase 3, Endgame, and Infinity War. And we've now got these Fox properties owned by Disney waiting for Feige to do something with. And what do you know? We're in the middle of a pretty legendary arc of the X-Men by Hickman. So it's a good time to be Hickman. And maybe this all just works out in bigger ways than we think. But back to this interview. So Hickman sat down, did a very nice bit of roundtable with Adventures in Poor Taste. Why not give interviews to me? Because I have no audience. That's why. But answered some really good questions and kind of filled out a little bit more. So pulling from some of the highlights of that interview in a kind of a quick little video, we learned about a couple things. The least of which are we have maybe 2 new comics coming out. It could, in theory, be the same comic, but probably it's 2 new comics, one of which is a Moira-centered comic. This is a comic that's going to fill out a little bit more of her timeline and what she's up to and kind of the strange world of Moira and alternate realities. My very solid bet is this is the book that's going to be written by Leah Williams. I think it fits her style, especially if you go to the Extremist book that was out with Age of X. It's that kind of metaphysical, what's real, what's not. Hickman drops at least that there was a writer he really wanted. We know he really wanted Leah Williams to do a book. And that's my guess as to who's writing the Moira book. That's my suspicion. Also, I don't think the Moira title is going to be an ongoing. I think it's a limited series or a shortened book. And we also, at least I'd heard a rumor at one point that Leah Williams was going to be on a limited series book. So to me, that's my bet of what's coming together there. But new Moira title. The other one is that there is a new book centered around resurrection. Here it's a little bit hard to tell if Hickman is being a little tongue-in-cheek to some extent, because he does say it sounds like a story. We have a series built around resurrection problems coming out next year. So what if there's a mistake and you think someone's dead, but you make a copy anyway? That's an interesting story. Once again, I think that there's a limited series there. I think we are going to see some experimentation with shortened series. Not everything's going to be an ongoing, and that's good. If he's building a universe, everything shouldn't be planned for ongoing. And I hope Marvel has the foresight to have some of these books just be themselves. Tell the story they're going to want to tell, and then end. You don't need to go on forever with it. Just tell a good story and be done. I think that will go a long way to helping out Marvel and kind of fan trust and other things. But anyway, 2 new books that are coming out. The other kind of interesting tease that were in there a little bit was that somebody brought up the question of why Jean Grey wearing that particular costume in House of X #1. What's with the green costume? And there was a little bit of a teaser, like Hickman was disappointed more people didn't play up that costume choice. Here's where I think we haven't answered the Phoenix question, and that was a costume she was wearing during that era. I think that there's a potential Phoenix connection, a story that needs to be told, or at least resolving what's going on there. Is it kind of branching off from the life she wished she had? Is it what's going on with the Phoenix Force, and how does that fit into everything? I think there's probably a little bit of a story there around Jean Grey, but anyway, that was another little tease. people who want to go kind of figure some things out. In terms of a look at what's going to happen with the series going forward, no pre-Krakoa stories, but they are going to fill in the gaps. So how some of these reunions took place, very much in the same way that Hickman did the narrative in House of X, Powers of X, where he had characters who would show up and we'd see the scene from different angles. We're going to get more of that as we learn how these characters come together and do their thing. Um, a lot of people, or at least the question, I've seen this a lot of videos too, and one of the complaints has been people saying these aren't my X-Men. These are bad guys. X-Men aren't bad guys. What gives with them being bad guys? Well, I think Hickman. If you've read Hickman's work before, he likes telling stories with some ambiguity, not shades of gray, just forcing the reader to kind of really suss out for themselves what makes a good action or a bad action, what makes somebody desperate or not desperate. He said in the interview he likes writing stories that take a hard position or force the reader to take a hard position. They're going to have to understand what they like and what they don't like. And I think that's good storytelling. I think that's good craftsmanship. And that's what Hickman has done here with X-Men. And I think that dynamic of, are you supposed to be behind these guys or against them? That was the missing element behind AVX. The people who came and put Avengers versus X-Men together were telling us that you were supposed to kind of figure out which side you were supposed to like. But it felt like they wrote it in such a way that the X-Men were sympathetic and Cyclops was doing a lot of what he felt he had to do because he was forced into it from a very kind of bullying, we're going to take your territory behavior for the Avengers. But you were supposed to be rooting for the Avengers. It was one of those moments that was very backwards in comics where a lot of people did not understand why we were supposed to be thinking the X-Men were bad guys. That's doing it wrong. I think Hickman has done a good job where you're really forced to kind of understand some of the decisions that are being made and ask yourself how you feel about them. And I think with that, kind of a discussion around soul. One of the other comments people have made or criticisms people have made is, Nightcrawler would never allow himself to be resurrected like this, not with his religious beliefs. Neither would Wolverine and several others. But yet, here they are being resurrected. What gives with that? Why, where does their soul fit? If memories are just being inserted into people, what does that mean? And maybe that's what Hickman's talking about in terms of a resurrection-themed book, exploring some of those concepts. I think he's doing some really interesting sci-fi themes and topics here, and so that was part of the interview as well. Other little things, talked about how Forge's costume was wrong in the scene with Forge and Professor X. This makes sense and is, just admitted error. It's nice that kind of came out that way because that was one of those moments that didn't quite fit in the timeline. And you don't want to think too hard about continuity, but that moment just didn't plug together with the other things that were going on. People were having to try and figure out kind of exactly where that fit. So knowing that was an error, all right, that answers that question. Asking, one of the questions in the interview was, will we see Namor again? And we got I'm not going to answer that question, which means yes. Namor is in a weird place in Marvel right now, being part of the Invaders storyline. I think Zdarsky is doing a very good job of trying to tie all that together. But his handling in the Avengers is a eco-terrorist, and then other places, it's a very confused place for Namor. So looking forward to how he plays into the story in the future. Not going to heavily worry about continuity. That's a good sign. And no more Omega level mutants. That's good too. And we can look forward to more data pages in his comics. We're going to have those. Hopefully not an additional power price point. That would be nice. And finally, he repeated a comment. And in fact, he said that this is kind of a mandate to the X office. And I think it's an interesting statement of be additive, not destructive. This was in some of his early interviews, and many took it as a shot he was taking to the previous X team, who did just kind of destroy and kind of threw the toys on the floor before Hickman took over. And so I like that sentiment. I think that's always how I felt comics should be. Be additive. Don't wreck things for the people who are coming after you. Be respectful of history. It's nice to see Hickman continuing to repeat that theme. And it's also nice to see him say, this is a mandate for the X office. This is something that, they're going to insist upon. Be additive. Don't destroy things for other people. And, that's really taking an editorial stance. And it's a good one for comics. So I appreciate it a lot as a reader. It was a good interview. Like I said, the link is in the description. This is what I took out of it. You probably have heard some of this stuff a million places all over, but I'm excited to talk about some of this stuff, and maybe we'll do a live stream in the future where we can just have some people call in or what, I don't know, whatever. Be nice to do this free form at some point. I know I would have fun. Hey, if you like this, click subscribe, click like, leave me a comment, ask questions. If you want to speculate or think about things, leave a comment below or follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, or don't follow me and just ask me the question there. That's okay too. So thanks for listening. Have a good day.